Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name's Melveed, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about monoliths and whether progress in them and around them should be shared across your entire account. This is something that I've seen a bit discussed in the in-game chat and kind of in community spaces, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently as, D4 has released a new league for PoE, and it just really compares and contrasts the different ARPGs out there. And I think this is also an important conversation to have, particularly for the sake of new players as launch approaches, as bigger patches approach as well. So, without any further ado, let's tell a story. So, imagine, if you will, that you're a new player. You're playing your first character, you're pushing corruption, and you're struggling. The build is good, you think, but your heart isn't in it. There's only so many dozens of hours you can sink into a tune before even the grind you so enjoy becomes too much. You need something different to bring that spark back. You finish up your 100th unique sword or dagger arco in the Reign of Dragons when it drops. Gelcor's Blast Knife, 3 LP. Perfect. Excitement fills you. This is your chance to make a new character and continue your push through the depths of corruption. So you hurry and do so. You make a new character. You rush through the campaign. 400 corruption waits for no man. You beat the final act and open your map to teleport to your favorite monolith, only to find it dark and gray. Horror fills you as you realize, slowly, that all those hours spent pushing corruption are for naught. There's no God here. Only the fall of the outcasts. Before we get into the pros and cons of sharing monolith progress, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what monoliths actually are. This is the current one of the current in-game systems for Last Epoch. Everything about the monolith, from access to it, to the corruption in it, to the layout and the rewards inside of it, are currently character locked, which means that if you start a new character and push to the end game, you basically are starting your end game over again, except for maybe you have access to some other items that you've gotten from previous characters. And like I said, progress in monoliths is completely character bound. Whatever corruption level you're at on your other character is locked to that character. Any modifiers, echo modifiers that are in effect, are locked. Whatever blessings you've received from monoliths are locked to the character that got them. All the progress through the web, the layout of the web, the rewards that are available, all character locked, including whether or not you even have access to the empowered version or not. This is moderately unique among RPGs that I'm familiar with. Like if you see D3's Greater Rifts or PoE's maps, there's some amount of shared experience in the end game between all of your characters. And it just feels bad. If you're a new character, then it feels like all your progress has been reset. If you're an older, experienced player just trying out a new playstyle, then it just adds several hours to your grind, particularly if you enjoy really high corruption content. But, so the question really becomes, is sharing monolith's progress across all your characters actually a good thing? Is it good for the game? Well, there's some pros and cons to that. Let's talk pros first. And while there aren't a lot that I can think of for why sharing monolith progress would be a good thing, the ones that are there are huge. They are absolutely massive, and they can easily outweigh whatever cons that sharing might have. The first, and probably the most important, is that it just lessens the amount of grinding you have to do in this game. Last Epoch is an action ARPG, so grind is important, but it is just hard if you have limited time, if you don't have much time to play, or even if you just don't enjoy it. Then the amount of grinding that Monolith progress not being shared can feel overwhelming, and it can really disincentivize you from, exploring new play styles, creating a new character, and playing the game for as long as you would otherwise. If you share, you also get to switch characters depending on circumstances. So you can have a character with an absolutely great skill set for killing bosses, and another character that's great for clearing echoes, and then sharing the progress allows you to switch between them and make progress that way, which can feel really good. It's not a lot of fun having to clear through a ton of echoes if your character is just not built to be fast. Kind of related, but echo modifiers, particularly in later stages of corruption and in later on in the web, they can just become a huge issue where if you pick an echo modifier on accident, or you're not paying that much attention, or you just underestimate how powerful it is, then it can totally prevent you from making any further progress further into the web with that character. And sharing would allow you to swap and basically pick the tools at your disposal to meet the challenge in front of you. The other pro for sharing is that because you have more access to more resources in the forms of different characters that you can play, this can enhance your feeling of progression through the game. It can allow you to push corruption further or even at all, because it doesn't feel like you have to spend so much time working on a new character, getting them up to geared, and then pushing them through corruption on their own. It can allow you to kind of take a holistic approach to your account and worry about account progress rather than character progress. For cons, there's a few more individual cons that I can think of, but they're not near as severe as like lessening the amount of grinding that you would have to do. But the first and most obvious con is, how then do you handle corruption when your progress is shared? Because if you push corruption too far, then it can make pushing with a new character very hard, if not outright impossible, unless they're already well equipped, which means that you have to have gotten the equipment already, build the character, and then start pushing with that character. Which can feel bad. And then kind of the same thing with echo mods, where if you're really far into the web and you have, 5 to 10 echo mods, how is a freshly geared character supposed to really just dive right into that? So it can make, again, that's another instance where it can just make it hard or impossible for a new character to help you push through the monolith. Related, but not relevant necessarily to the player experience, but maybe to the development of the game, is that currently the way of increasing or decreasing your corruption is via killing Oribus, where if you had a really high corruption, killing him closer to the center of the monolith could lower your corruption, whereas killing him further from the center of the monolith increases your corruption. If we keep that system in place, if that system stays in place, then if you start a new character but you need to lower the corruption, then if you want to switch characters again and go back to your really strong one that was pushing corruption, then you have to re-push to where you were before you can even start pushing corruption again. Another con is that blessings in their current form are tied to completing killing the monolith boss. And so then you have to ask, are they going to continue to be that way? Would they continue to be that way? Where you just have to kill the boss with a character and that's good enough? Or are they shared between characters now because they're part of the monolith system? And if we're going to share all of the monolith system, then they also should be shared. So if you have them just tied to characters and tied to the boss fight, then that lets you kind of cheese your way through some of the difficulty of fighting the boss, where you have to, build up the stability yourself build up the stability with the character and then fight the boss. You would be able to just build up the stability, switch characters, fight the boss, switch back, or however it is you want to handle that. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. That is, in fact, kind of one of the pros of you have boss-killing characters. But it can just limit the feeling of how much your character has progressed versus how much your account has progressed. And for some people, one is more important than the other, or vice versa. On the other hand, if you just share the blessings across the board, then that's a super simple solution for it. But it can limit your build diversity if some builds need specific blessings rather than kind of a generalized spread. So that could either increase just the amount of farming that you have to do, or it could make, some of your builds just straight up impossible, again, if you need a specific blessing. Now that we've talked about the pros and cons a little bit, let's talk about compromises that might make more of the community happy rather than doing one or the other. The first compromise that I thought of was a slider for corruption to control how much corruption is affecting any particular echo or the monolith without having to repush, but otherwise keep the monolith web the same across all characters, and including stability. This is probably the weakest of the compromises, in my opinion, because you do lose some granularity in terms of corruption. So, because it's a slider, it would probably have to tick on like 5 corruption or 10 corruption or maybe even 25, which really loses you some, like I said, some of the granularity of, okay, well, this character can do, 244, this other one can do 247. And while, yeah, there's only a 3 corruption difference, that can make a difference if you're really pushing the limits of what you can do or what you're trying to do. Occasionally a 3% or a 3 corruption difference could be the difference between being one-shot or not being one-shot, which can make a difference, particularly in hardcore. The slider still leaves the question of echo modifiers as well, where if you are at 250 corruption and then you slide it down to 150, what happens to the echo modifiers? Do they stay the same? Do they scale based off of corruption? Then that means that if you come across a particularly difficult corruption modifier or a particularly difficult echo modifier, rather than actually having to bring yourself up to the challenge, you can instead just lower the corruption to get through it easier and then increase the corruption again, rather than having to actually face the challenge and face the consequences of your choices. The slider does allow you to specialize, which is, in my opinion, a positive, where you can have one character built for bosses and one for echoes, because the monolith web is the same. This would, on the other hand, kind of a negative, let you breeze through low corruption echoes and face the boss on a high corruption, or vice versa, where you just breeze through the boss on like 100 corruption and then go back to pushing echoes at 250 or whatever. And this is probably a negative on the whole for the game design, as it could throw off intended access to rare items, particularly once trade is available. Doing it that way, where you could, just get through the boss and farm the boss quicker because you're pushing through echoes at a lower corruption, could mean that boss echo or boss items, boss uniques, become just way too common, way too easily available. The second compromise that I thought of was just track corruption and echo mods on a per character basis, but keep the monolith web the same. This removes the issue of having to balance what corruption you're doing, dealing with what echo mods you have available, while still keeping, still allowing you to specialize into boss killing or not boss killing, or doing echoes. This does have a similar issue with the slider, though it does mean that you get to keep some of that granularity, and does solve the echo mod problem, like I said. But both of those first two compromises would make pushing corruption really strange. Because, so like if you're pushing corruption and you max out at about 250 corruption, do you still get a Gaze of Orbis for killing a boss at 150 corruption? Or what happens if you instead if you stack up a whole bunch of Gaze of Orbis and you kill Orbis at 150 corruption? How exactly would that work? And that's probably something that the developers could solve, but that could seriously infringe upon their ability to do, and their time to do, something else that might be better for the community. The third compromise that I thought of, and my personal favorite, the one I think would just make the most people happy, because it's very simple and should have no significant effect on balance of anything, is just to, once you've unlocked empowered monoliths for the first time, just give it to all other characters. So, let's say, 1.0 comes out, the fresh season starts, I unlock empowered monoliths on my first character. Any other character I make after that would then have access to empowered monoliths immediately as soon as they got to endgame, whenever that might be for that character. This, I think, is the strongest one, simply because it doesn't have a significant balance cost, or having to add any other significant systems. I don't know what their code base looks like. I imagine, though, that just having a variable for corruption, or not corruption, for empowered monolith access is probably the simplest solution for a compromise, versus, building a slider or combining monolith echoes without sharing corruption. But anyway, that's about all I have to say on the matter. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think about sharing monolith progress. Should it be shared entirely, or not at all? Should there be one of the compromises I mentioned? Or if you have your own compromise, I'd be happy to hear it. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe, or let me know down in the comments. I do enjoy doing build guides, but I do also enjoy thinking about the game in general, and I enjoyed this kind of exercise as well. So yeah, like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching, and have a fantastic rest of your day.